Hello.
Hello,
How are you doing this week?
I am doing excellent.
Cool, cool. Good to hear it. Um, so what we're doing today is we're continuing with a theme that we've been doing a lot of lately. We've been covering a bunch of moral philosophy stuff. And last week, we did a video that was about objectivity in morals, or like the idea of being impartial um, and I'm probably not summarizing this very well. Like it was the idea that there's some kind of commitment to reason and treating people equally and treating different points of view equally, and how important it was or wasn't to consider morals objectively versus subjectively. And
Yeah,
I was not really satisfied with that video. I kind of didn't really think they did a great job covering either side of that disagreement. Um, I don't know. Did you feel that same way?
yeah. I think the trouble is that when you start to try to give just a lecture on a subject that's very contentious, it's always going to feel like someone who's watching that lecture disagrees is always going to feel like they weren't properly addressing the arguments. Because it's very difficult sometimes to, even when you're talking to a person one on one, it's very easy to sometimes feel like the other person isn't responding to you. So when they're not even when you're just listening to a conversation, it becomes even worse, which can then be very frustrating because you might say, oh, well, that argument that he made, that's actually countered by this other argument.
Yeah.
That he wasn't addressing. So yeah, that kind of stuff happens all the time.
Yeah, so I think you're right that it is just kind of going to be inherently frustrating to listen to a lecture about that, but nevertheless, that's what we're doing today is we're going to try another lecture on that subject and try to at least hope that it covers it a little bit more deeply than the last one did, or that we can maybe provoke some additional discussion about it.
Mm-hmm.
If this one doesn't work out, then I think I'm ready to just move on to another topic.
Yeah.
But anyway, we've got this one's like an hour long lecture, so I imagine we're probably gonna be taking 2 to 3 hours to cover it, like we typically do. But...
All right.
We're all sorts of people here. This is a selfie. This is a selfie. This is a selfie. Okay, let's start with this. A quick, shortish list of objects or things that some people believe are real, some people believe they exist, but that you don't believe they exist because you know better. So, like, I need some examples.
Leprechaun.
Leprechauns are spelled like that.
Right, nasty enough.
Leprechauns. Okay, great. Something else. Unicorns. Great. Shout out like two more. Bigfoot, I heard. And mermaids, good. Numbers? Oh, no. Gotta leave that off. That'll ruin the whole talk. We can tentatively also, much more controversially, put God on there for the moment. We'll come back to God. Okay. So here's the thing. It would be nice if we had some sort of principle that you are following that explains why you don't believe in these things, but you do believe in the things that you do believe in, like, mountains, and fried rice, and all the other stuff that really exists. So, well, here's a first go at a principle like that. The first thing you might notice is, looking at this list, is that the stuff over here that you rationally don't believe in, you've never experienced that stuff. You've never sensed it with any of your senses. So the principle that we might start working with, the one that's operating in your mind, a good one, might be something like, you should only believe in things that you experience. Okay, that's a first go at a sort of a principle that's going to separate these from these. But I don't think that's going to work because it's probably too restrictive. That is, it's going to get the result that you shouldn't believe in all sorts of things. It's going to rule out a whole bunch of stuff because you haven't experienced that stuff that you really should believe in, that it is rational to believe in. So presumably we could think of some examples of things that you personally have not experienced but that you should believe are real.
Like Saturn.
What's that? Saturn. Well, no, well, I don't know about you, but I took a college course in astronomy, and I've not only seen photographs of Saturn, I looked through a telescope and saw Saturn personally. So maybe you didn't. So we'll go with you. Yeah, good. Because if you look through the telescope, of course, the actual light from Saturn that's reflected from the sun, it goes from the sun, it hits Saturn, and then it goes, the very light then goes into the telescope and then goes literally into your eyeball. That's the very light that traveled all the way from space. So I've totally experienced Saturn. Well, some of you may get there. Anyway, but good. If you haven't experienced it yourself, then you might just trust me. There might be enough trustworthy folks, right? So maybe we quickly revise the principle to a second go, something like, you should only believe in things that you or someone trustworthy, right, experiences. All right. What do we think about that? Still too restrictive? Michael? Oh, a good question that we will not answer or discuss any further. Excellent. Ken?
Blind people.
Well, no, blind people have senses. They experience things. They just experience things with their... Blind people experience mountains. They can hike. They can hike. They can feel the mountain with their hands. They can smell the mountain air. They can hear the mountain breeze.
Clouds. I can't experience clouds.
No, guys, you can experience all these things. You can see anything you can see, you can experience. Anything you can smell, you can experience. You can smell all sorts of stuff. But it seems to me like there's things, well, let me just push this a little bit farther forward. It seems to me that there are things that no one has experienced, or at least for a certain amount of time no one had yet experienced, but that we still were rational even at that time in believing in the existence of those things. Ryan?
Something like an electron constitute.
Yeah, something like an electron. Yeah, right? This rules out electrons because, at least for a while no one experienced electrons, and now we have electron microscopes, and, do we experience them now? Not clear. Too many hands. Let's just stick with electrons. There's going to be other things like that, like Pluto, before we saw Pluto, right? There was something about the orbits of other planets, and we knew Pluto had to be there. Anyway, so we've got electrons, and we've got Saturn. So we're going to have to revise this principle again, and a quick revision of it might be, you should only believe in things that you or someone trustworthy experiences, or that must exist to explain what we do experience. Right? That's the deal with electrons, I take it, is that we did experience all sorts of stuff electric shocks and light bulbs and things like that. And it turns out that electrons needed to be there, even though we couldn't yet experience them, or maybe we still haven't experienced them. They need to be there in order to explain the stuff that we do experience. So this revised version of the principle, I think this is the one we'll stick with. It seems to get it just right. Or at least a lot of people think that something like this gets it right. Right? It gets rid of... Oh, wait. These should have been over here. No one was going to correct me? That those should have gone... Okay. Everybody understands. Yeah, because electrons and Saturn are real. Anyway, it seems to be the right principle for what sorts of stuff you should believe in. There are different names that we could give a principle like this. Empiricism is a name you might have for it. It's a certain application maybe of Occam's razor, whatever. That's another fancy kind of name. You might think that, broadly speaking, this kind of principle, if you're operating with it, could be called something like the scientific worldview, maybe, or a certain version of it. Whatever we call it, it seems like a good one. It seems like the right principle to operate with. And, well, we're not the first people to come up with it. This principle, or something like this, was very attractive to many philosophers, including the greatest philosopher of the Scottish Enlightenment, David Hume. And here he is. Hold on a sec. He looks like this. Okay, so here's what Hume does. This was a good idea, it turned out. At least a good idea if you wanted other people to read the stuff that you wrote for like several hundred years. His idea was take that principle, empiricism or whatever, and apply it to moral reality, moral truths or moral laws. So like, real quick, here's what he says. Take any action allowed to be vicious, willful murder, for instance. That is, pick some form of behavior that you think is evil. Vicious means exhibiting a vice. So evil. Take any action that you think is evil, examine it in all lights, and see if you can find the matter of fact or real existence which you call vice. That is, take this thing. So like, take a willful murder. So like, someone murders someone else intentionally. Willfully means intentionally, right? Someone murders someone else intentionally with no justification. It's not in self-defense or anything like that. Think about the example. Look at the event. Look at the action in front of you and see if you can find the wrongness. He says, in whichever way you take it, you find only certain passions, motives, volitions, and thoughts. That is, you're going to see a whole bunch of stuff. He doesn't mention these, but one thing you're going to experience is you're going to experience like blood. There's going to be blood, and there's going to be the smell. There's going to be the arms moving, right? And then you're going to also have, well, good enough evidence for believing in passions, motives, volitions, and thoughts. That is, the murderer is going to have some feelings in them, right? And you're going to have good reason for believing that those feelings exist, because they, you might think, are needed to explain the actions that you observe, right? So you're following this empiricist principle. What do you find? What do you see? And what do you have evidence for? Well, you've got the blood, and you've got the hands and the legs, and you've got the anger, and you've got the fear. Those things are all real. You see them when you look at. Don't do it. Don't do that to me, screen. Check the input. Yeah, nice. Okay. Where was I? Oh yeah, right. So you've got reason on this principle to believe in all those things, but then he says there is no other matter of fact in the case. There's nothing else there, right? There's nothing else other than the arms and the legs and the blood and the anger and the fear. That's all there is for you to believe in when you look at a case of something that's supposedly evil. The vice entirely escapes you as long as you consider the object, that is the evilness, the wrongness, the moral quality. You can't find it. It escapes you. As long as the only thing you're looking at is the murder itself, the action, right? That's the object. The object is the murder, the thing you're looking at. You can never find it till you never find what? You can never find the wrongness, the evil, the badness. You can never find it till you turn your reflection into your own breast and find a sentiment of disapprobation which arises in you towards this action. Here is a matter of fact, but 'tis the object of feeling. It lies in yourself, not in the object. That is, there's something like wrongness, sure, but the only wrongness that you find is not some objective wrongness that exists in the action of murder. It's just a feeling inside of you that you dislike this action. That's all that this empiricist principle that we produced is going to let you believe is real. If you really follow the principle, then all you can believe in is, well, blood, and feet, and arms, and anger, and fear, and then another feeling, which is your feeling of disapproval. So that when you pronounce any action or character to be vicious, to be evil.
I think I think I know what that is. Sorry, I didn't realize. I think my Discord is picking up my other monitor. Sorry about that.
Yeah, there was half a second of somebody going like "guys" or something.
Okay, good to know.
Okay. Yeah.
When you call something wrong, whenever you condemn something as wrong or unjust, you mean nothing but that from the constitution of your nature you have a feeling or sentiment of blame from the contemplation of it. That is, look, All there is to rightness and wrongness is feelings that people get. There's no objective rightness or wrongness in the objects. It's not objective. It's not in the objects. It's not really out there in the murder. There's nothing really wrong with murder. It's just all there is some feelings that people get about it. That's what happens if you apply this principle to moral facts or moral reality. Okay, here's the thing. This principle is even stronger, I think, than Hume realized, right? If you just run this same argument that Hume ran, you can run it on even more stuff than just morality. So, but if we're going to understand that, we need two distinctions, or one distinction and then one division between three things, like a tristinction. I don't really know what the word for that is. Anyway, so like, stick with me for a few seconds here. Okay. We need the idea of a descriptive law and a normative law, right? So a descriptive law is like a generalization about the universe. It's just a pattern, sort of, that we observe in the universe. Like, Ohm's law. Anybody know what Ohm's law is? It's like a thing in science. Yeah.
In physical science, Ohm's law relates to electricity.
Uh-huh.
It's basically resistance.
Yeah, it's like resistance in like a thing. It's like the current is like I is like the voltage over the other thing. Resistance. Is that Ohm's law? Derek has a PhD in science, but not in biology. Yeah, I don't know. Okay, anyway, there are rules like this, or like Newton's law of like, let's just pretend we know what Ohm's law is. And then Newton had a law of universal gravitation, right? And the idea was all the particles in the universe are attracted to one another at a proportional to their mass, proportional to the product of their masses. You multiply their masses. Proportional to the product of their masses divided, or inversely proportional to their distance. Square root of this? All right, guys. All right. Give the students a chance. Okay. Right. So descriptive laws are just like descriptions. They're just ways things are. Like that's just the way things are in our universe. Is that all particles are attracted to each other at blah 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 blah? That's just the way things are. Then there are laws or facts, if you like, about how things ought to be. Right. So like, murder is wrong. That's not how things are. It's not like, that's not saying murders don't happen. That's saying they ought not happen, right? Or you ought not murder. You shouldn't. These say how things are, and these say how things should be. But notice, there's more than one type of this, right? There's the moral ones, like murder is wrong, and then there's the we call them prudential ones, like diversify investments. And then there's ones about how to be rational, like believe, the earth is round. This is the point. So the point is, we've got a difference between descriptive and normative stuff. Don't worry, we're going to come back to this, and we're going to use Hume's test again, right? We've got the descriptive stuff is how things are, and then we've got the normative stuff, that's how things should be. But there's different varieties of this one. Here's what I mean. So maybe we're very comfortable on the surface with moral normativity. Right? That's like stuff that's wrong that you shouldn't do. Maybe it's facts that you owe to other people. You shouldn't murder them, for instance. Right? The prudential stuff, here's how you understand the prudential stuff. Okay. Some of you are no doubt ignorant of things that happened in the 90s. Here's an example.
How dare you.
Beyonce was in a group. Okay? She was in a group before she was a solo artist. The group was called Destiny's Child. There were 3 of them. Okay? Kelly, Roland, and Michelle. I don't remember Michelle's last name with an H. Anyway, she was in a group, right? And they were very successful. You think Beyonce's big. Destiny's Child was big-ish, right? The group was big. And then there was a point when she had to make a decision about whether she was going to stay with the group or become a solo artist, release a solo album. Now, I don't know what the inner workings of the group or whatever, but you can imagine that the following happened. You can imagine that there was a deal that the singers in the group made that was look, we're going to stick together for 4 albums. And they make a promise. And they shake hands or something. right? Or whatever. So she's made a promise, let's say, to stick with the group. But like, you guys know how show business is. Like, you got a moment when you've got to like take your chance. This is your only chance to make it as a solo artist. You're in the news, and you're not going to be in the news in a few years from now, and this is the time to release a solo album and become Beyonce, right? Because right now you're kind of Beyonce, but you're like in a group, you know? On the one hand, she's got like a moral obligation, or there's a moral rule. Maybe the rule is something like, keep your promises. Keep your promises, right? So in one sense, that's the moral sense, she should stay in the group. She made a promise, right? But there's another sense in which like this is her chance, folks. This is her chance to make it as a solo artist. So like, if she was only interested in what she should do for herself, then she should, like, look, if she breaks this promise to the other members of Destiny's Child, she'll be fine. She's going to have enough money to get other friends, you know? The difference here is the difference between what you ought to do, maybe what you owe to others, and maybe what you owe to yourself, right? What you ought to do, what's in your own best interest. Now, you may think that one of these is more important than the other, but all I want you to see now is that they're both non-descriptive. They both seem to be facts about what someone ought to do, not what they do. Right? This says what you ought to do morally, whatever that means. This says what you ought to do for yourself,
pause for a second?
Whatever that means. But it's
Yeah.
Okay, how much do you buy the claim that these are facts?
The problem is the word fact is like, depending upon what a person means by a fact, I don't think any facts exist. I think that you could say that this is as much a fact as like any of our other facts, given the fact that we sort of have to accept like the law of identity, and that like even stepping aside from the idea of like, oh, what if I'm just in the Matrix, or what if I'm in the world of Descartes' demon? You even begin to, I think, have logical conversations need to endorse that like, well, X equals X, and like premise conclusion is valid, and things like that. So from that, so I get so. I think generally I agree, but it's just like those are the kind of caveats I would add. Like typically 99% of the time that doesn't come up. It's not like, oh, do you want to go to McDonald's? Do we even know that McDonald's is McDonald's? Like this never comes up. But like when you're getting this deep in the weeds, it does bear. It is worthy of just signposting that, I think.
I sort of think these are like misrepresented facts in a manner of speaking. I sort of think like there's a fact that keeping your promises is a good way to cultivate good relationships with other people, and to it's probably consistent with your values. It'll be good for your conscience, and it'll be good for your reputation, and I think those kind of things are facts. But to say just like that one should keep their promises, I think that statement is kind of just a proxy for that collection of facts that's relevant to the arguments for keeping your promises that are factual separately.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I think it's just a matter of like. No, actually, yeah, no. I was gonna say like there's a distinction between like in practice versus on paper, but like you shouldn't that distinction should only exist on paper, because like in the real world, obviously, the actual outcomes, even if they weren't expected or sort of like second or third order, still matter just as much.
Yeah. So given the information that's available to Beyonce, you could say that she could be like, she could make like objective analyses of what to expect if she does one decision versus the other, and I think those things are facts. And then so maybe a good way to put it is that to say that someone should keep their promises, or that they will benefit from going their own way, or whatever it is. Maybe I should look at that as like a summary of a collection of facts, and the summary isn't a fact in itself, but it's, I don't know, something like that.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, that's all I got on this.
Still something that you ought to do. There's a third type, right? These are all varieties of normativity. The third type is epistemic. It doesn't work with the Beyonce example as well, because epistemic norms, episteme is the Greek word for knowledge. So epistemic norms are facts about what you ought to believe, not how you ought to act. So like, given the evidence presently available, you ought to believe that the earth is round. You just really should. If you don't, if you think it's flat, given the evidence available, then you've made a mistake. You haven't done what you ought. In the epistemic sense. Epistemic just means rationally, what you ought to believe, rationally speaking. Okay, so we've got the descriptive and the normative, and then we've got different varieties of normativity. Run Hume's test. The same thing, where you just look at something and see if you can experience the morality, the moralness, and you can't, and so therefore you shouldn't believe in it. Right? Run that test against all types of normativity, and you'll get the same result. Right? We all know what Beyonce did. She released a solo album. Worked great. Right? Screw Kelly and Michelle. Right? I don't know if she broke a promise. I don't know. I don't want her coming after me. The point is, she's thinking to herself, look, at least prudentially speaking, I ought to release a solo album. This is my time, folks. Well, that fact, there she is, she's deliberating, and then she's writing the album. Does she write them? I really don't know. And then she's writing the album, and then she's releasing it. Look at the action. Look at the object. Is there any sense in which she ought to do it? Where's the ought? Where's the should of prudence? You can't find it. All you see is Beyonce and like records
I think
on
the
tables
opportunity
and
she
stuff like
had
that, and her
was real.
thoughts.
That's the
right?
fact.
She might have thoughts about what she ought to do. You might have to believe in those because those are needed to explain what you do experience, right? But you don't need to appeal to actual objective facts about what people ought to do, even for themselves, in order to explain the things you do experience. So on this principle, according to this empiricist principle, you shouldn't believe that these laws, these norms are real, these facts, if you like. And the same goes for epistemic facts, facts about what is really rational to believe. Those have to go as well. Okay, so that's the argument against the existence of objective morality. And it's an argument, well, against more than that, against any kind of normative stuff at all. Any kinds of facts about what's right or what's wrong, even not just morally, but for yourself or rationally. Right? Okay, that's the argument.
pause
You
again?
shouldn't believe in those things for the
Okay, so I already think this guy's doing a much better job of covering this argument than the previous video did. I wish he would have maybe talked a little bit more about justifying that principle that he wrote up there, right? The idea of you should only believe in things that you've experienced or someone trustworthy has experienced or that must exist to explain. Because I think it's actually not straightforwardly and obviously true that principle must be what it is.
Yeah, I think he's just taking it for granted that he doesn't need to spend a lot of time establishing this. But I agree, there's a lot of people that would disagree with this kind of thing. But I am somewhat sympathetic to him not wanting to dive into the entire justification for epistemology, I think is the word. Basically, how you know what you know. But I think I broadly agree with the spirit of what he's trying to get across. I'm sure I could needle at it a bit, but I suspect that he's got a much more developed statement that he could engage with. He just doesn't want to dive into that now.
Yeah, I think if you're just talking about the efficiency of using his time in a lecture, that it makes sense why it's just it's not super directly relevant to the topic we're trying to cover, and so maybe we don't need to get into that. But if you were trying to persuade someone who disagrees with the argument you're making, I suspect there's a good chance you would have to get into that.
Yeah.
And so this strikes me as I was gonna say, like, my impulse was to say it's just like a surface level summary of what the argument is. Although I think it's a little better than that. He did get into the justification for it, more than just stating the argument and leaving it at that. But then, in order for this to be persuasive to someone who disagrees with it, I do think you'd have to dive deeper. But I can understand why, just in the interest of time, he might not have chosen to do that.
Same reason that you shouldn't believe in leprechauns. There's, I think, now Hume, I don't think realized this, although I haven't read every word that Hume ever wrote. There's a big problem with this argument, it seems to me. I'm sure other people have noticed this also, but I haven't read them saying it, right? But there's a big problem with this argument. It looks really good, because the principle is great, or at least it looks great, right? And it looks like it does apply in these ways to
the principle fails
reality,
its own test.
prudential reality,
might be the thing he's going to say.
epistemic reality. But there's a problem. I'll say what the problem is unless someone interrupts me. The problem is that it's self-defeating.
Oh, yep, there.
What the hell is this?
Rewatch.
This. With one of these in it. Here's the thing. I called it a principle a bunch of times. Like it's an empiricist principle. But, well, it seems like we could have also called it an epistemic law, right? It says what you ought to do. Specifically, it says what you ought to believe. Should you believe that leprechauns exist? It says no. Should you believe that morality exists? It says no. Should you believe that unicorns exist? It says no, right? Okay, should you believe that the epistemic fact that you should believe in things that you experience, or things that have been experienced by trustworthy people, or things that must exist in order for you to have those experiences? Like, should you believe
I think
in
there's
that
an argument
fact,
that it is one
fact?
of the things that
It
must
says
exist
no.
to explain the fact.
So if
I'm not
this
saying I buy
principle
it, but
is right, if you should adopt it, then it gets the result that you shouldn't believe that there's any normative law, objective normative law like this. If you adopt this principle, then it says that you should reject this principle. That's a problem, folks. That's enough, it seems to me, to save from this one particular attack, like objective moral facts. We haven't, of course, by that move, right, shown that objective moral facts do exist. But it seems to me like that's enough, or close to enough, to save objective moral facts from what is a very famous and seemingly very powerful argument against them. Let me say one more thing, and then I'm out of stuff, so then it'll be what everybody else wants to say. Should we just trash the principle then? Right? If something is self-defeating, you usually just toss it in the garbage. Because if something defeats itself, then it's been defeated. And once it's defeated, there it goes. Right? It seems to me like, no. It seems it's too good. It's too good to let go. The right move, I think, is to just say it only applies to descriptive entities. Right? So, like, this is a principle. We could just revise the principle, right? We just build that into the principle. It says you should only believe in descriptive things. You should only believe in descriptive things that you or someone trustworthy experiences, or that must exist to explain what we or you experience. Then, well, if we revise the principle like that, then it'll still get rid of unicorns. It'll still get rid of leprechauns. It'll keep electrons. It'll keep mountains. And it'll keep fried rice. Anyway, that's it. That's all I've got. This talk is done.
you want to pause for a second? So I would think someone who believes that morality is objectively real would think that it is a thing that can be described, though, right?
Yeah, I think I agree.
So therefore, like, I'm not convinced that this does save objective morality from that critique, And I'm not 100% convinced that the right move is to add descriptive as a qualifier to this. I mean, maybe. I think that's like a really good general rule about what to believe. It's just like my way of salvaging it would be to say like, this is a rule that works the vast majority of the time, but not always.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair.
So do you think the rest is just going to be Q&A or something, or I don't even know.
Yeah, actually, I think it is all.
Oh, okay, well, I'm actually surprised that the lecture ended there, right? Because I was expecting him to do because he starts talking about the argument against objective morality. I expected him to then go the argument for it, but instead it's just not covering that. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess maybe we can taking questions. Should you believe that tomorrow exists? We already believe in normative things, massive disagreement, technical terms, trustworthy experiences, controversial, objective moral facts. I guess we could maybe skip to here, or if you just want to go through all the questions one at a time.
I don't know. I mean, I guess if you got time, I'm down to just listen to all of them. But
yeah, sure.
Okay.
We can see how far we make it.
Now we'll just like take questions and like talk philosophy for until they kick us out of the room. Frank?
Yes.
Yes, Frank.
I was paying attention, but I don't remember what you said about why that is self-defeating.
Yeah, let's just say it again. Good. That's always the best. I agree. Okay, here's the thing. The principle says you should only believe in the existence of things that either you experience or that someone trustworthy experienced or experiences, or that must exist in order to explain the things that either you or someone trustworthy experiences. Right? But if this is a good principle, it's because there's some objective, normative fact out there in the world, a normative law, if you like it. There's some law out there, some normative law about what you ought to believe, right? And this is the sentence that writes down that law, right? That expresses what that law is. So a law's an entity, why not, right? If you follow this principle without the little word descriptive up there, right, then you get the result that you shouldn't believe in normative laws. But it is itself a normative law, right? Because you don't experience normative laws, no one trustworthy experiences normative laws, and you do not need to posit their existence in order to explain the things that you or others do experience.
You can follow a normative law without believing the normative law exists. Also,
there is no objective normative law that says that. So therefore, if there's no objective law that says that, then you don't need to adopt this principle. So if you adopt this principle, you don't need to adopt this principle. That's how it defeats itself. It categorizes itself along with unicorns and leprechauns and Bigfoot. Ryan.
Good memory, yes. First, great talk. It's really refreshing to hear someone on campus actually affirm objective morality.
Oh, you think they hate it? Okay, I don't know. Maybe.
This proposition, I don't know, what do you call it?
Principle. Empiricist principle.
Sufficient, at least not the way it's written. For example, I feel like I'm rationally justified in believing that tomorrow will come about.
Yep.
Clearly, no one has experienced tomorrow, nor is it necessary.
Good.
Or maybe it is necessary.
Good.
Maybe I'm wrong on that.
Yeah, is it necessary? Well, I don't think tomorrow. Well, here's the thing. Here's how I'm gonna respond. I'm gonna lean heavily on the word exists, right? So here's the thing. Should you believe that tomorrow exists? Well, actually, I think no, it doesn't. First of all, I don't know if times exist at all. That's weird. But maybe if times exist, I mean, you'd have to ask the metaphysician. But maybe if times exist, only one of them exists, and that's the present, right now.
Okay,
So
right now, hold on.
Yeah.
You're talking about something that's not written on the board. I think you might want to append, believe in the existence or descriptive things on existing things. You don't have existence up there.
I don't have the You're right. I didn't even put. Yeah. Well, believe in. Yeah. Good. Good. But you can always. There's more carrots. You just stick a little one of these in there, and you just go with. You should only believe in the existence of. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what I had in mind the whole time, actually. So actually, everybody go back and just stick in the existence of the whole time. Right. Yeah. So you only believe. Yeah. Good. I didn't even have the word existence up there. Fine. You should only believe in the existence of things that you or someone trustworthy experiences, or that must exist in order to explain what you do experience. And then maybe this principle says tomorrow doesn't exist, but it doesn't. It will.
I agree. If that's an yes, you're right. The objection fails.
Yeah. That's the best I got. I don't know your name. Grace.
Can you make a case for objective morality? This was like the pending.
Yeah, good.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, good. Yeah, good. It's one thing to defend a claim from an attack. It's another thing to, well, demonstrate that claim is actually true. Because, of course, you could defend something from some attacks, but some other attack might kill it, right? Well, here's the best I got. This is good. This is written on my notes as like bonus if I need to kill time. Give this positive argument. This isn't really so much a positive argument for the existence of objective morality, but it's something. We already believe. So we believe in certain things, certain mundane things like mountains and molecules and milkshakes or whatever. And then I want to say we already believe in some normative entities. Like if we look at this list of normative stuff, we definitely believe there are real objective ones of these. Epistemic laws? Oh goodness, we believe in these. All of you, right? Pick your favorite flat earther in your family who comes to Thanksgiving and gives their like flat Earth speech, right? It's really flat and the photos are faked, and etc. So on and so forth, right? Are they doing something? Is it really true that they're breaking some law, some real law that says, look, given this evidence, you should believe that the Earth is round? My suggestion is yes. They really and truly, objectively speaking, are being irrational, at least as regards that thing. So you already believe in these, I want to say. This is a part of reality for you, right? Yep. Oh, good. Power off, are you sure? Yes. Okay. You already believe in these. These are already things that you think are real. And then the thought is like, well, why not just add some more? That is, you might have been worried that moral stuff, moral entities, moral objects were like weird and different than other stuff that you ordinarily believe in, right? Than pretzels or whatever. But you've already got some normative stuff. And so if this is real, then this might as well be real too. That is, there's nothing additionally spooky or bizarre or weird about moral facts about what ought to be the case than there are about epistemic facts about what you ought to believe. And then once you realize that moral facts are no spookier than epistemic facts, well, then it just seems like, well, you kind of have like a prima facie, like on the face of it, inclination to think that, look, it's just wrong, like torturing kittens or willful murder or pick your favorite evil thing. You think that thing just is wrong, objectively speaking, I suggest.
So he's saying like moral facts are no spookier than epistemic facts. I'm not sure I buy that. Because I think we have evidence for epistemic facts that we can at least make pretty strong inductive arguments for that are different from the kind of arguments we'd have to make for moral facts, and given that they're supported by a different type of arguments and evidence, like I'm inferring that that's what he means by spooky. I'm not sure I want to put those things in the same category.
I would put them in the same category because they are distinct insofar as epistemics and morality are different concepts. But I actually think I would agree that it feels like you just sort of have to bite the bullet on certain epistemic things like the law of identity. There's no like arguing for it. And similarly, and I guess specifically the thing that makes me feel similar is in order to engage in the reality that we occupy, we just have to accept things like the law of identity. And in order...
I think you actually can argue for the law of identity, though, right? Just in terms of it being consistent with your experiences.
Yes, I would agree, but I think that argument fundamentally just comes down to a question of our perceptions, which we can't externally validate.
Right.
And I sort of feel similarly about morality. I don't really think there is a reason why human suffering is wrong, but like it just seems to be a given within my existence that I feel a certain way about it, and that it is incredibly compelling to me. In the same way that it's like they're I think what the sort of the core engine that drives the acceptance of these is the same, but they are to very different ends. I guess is sort of how I see that statement in regard to how spooky they are. Like the spookiness of them is the fact that, like, man, I just sort of believe these automatically in a way that's pretty dogmatic, and I feel pretty similar between epistemic facts and moral facts. In that regard, like I just sort of have to accept these.
So I think I halfway agree with this. Like, it's true that your brain just kind of automatically believes these things, sort of, right? But then I think if you then go to question, like, are these things really true? Like can I validate them independently of my having initially accepted them? I think you come to a different answer for these things separately, right? Because if you go to like epistemic norms, I think you can find which ones work better and which ones don't, right? Like you can actually just make a distinction in terms of like you can treat it almost like science in a way. Like you can make predictions about which epistemic norms are going to successfully predict your observations and which ones won't. But
I agree there. I think the problem I have is that whether or not we ought even, I think the problem is whether you're relying on the assumption that we ought believe in epistemic things that more accurately predict what we interpret as reality, and I think I sort of view that is just as loaded as like the question of like, oh well, my morals are better because they get the outcome that I like. I think that that's again where I see the parallels. It's like I can show you that my moral system produces better outcomes, but what is better? I can show you that my epistemic framework predicts things more accurately, but why ought we have a system that predicts things more accurately in the first place?
Yeah, well, I don't think I have to say that we actually ought believe things that predict things more accurately. I think if we simply notice that they do predict things more accurately, then that is sufficient to compel us to believe it, regardless of whether we ought or ought not.
Well, I guess the question comes down to: do you not think that you ought believe things that you ought believe? I guess it's sort of a roundaway thing of saying it.
I mean, I do believe that, but I don't think I need to believe that, I guess is what I'm saying, right? Like if I have some predictive model that successfully describes the world I live in, then I'm just going to believe it. And then, like, separately from that, I also do think that I ought to believe it, but I don't think I need to think that I ought to believe it.
It's because believing in it is almost inherent. If you're saying it does accurately predict, that is almost in of itself saying I believe in it. It's okay, I see. Okay, no, yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, I guess I see where you're coming from now. I guess from my perspective, I view that framework in and of itself of, well, this is accurate being the same as believing it. I operate in that framework, but I sort of view that framework as just a sort of loaded as like as like our shared moral framework.
I mean, sure, we could have an argument about ought we believe things that are accurate, right? Like, and I think I'm kind of sidestepping that argument. Like maybe we ought believe things are accurate, and maybe we ought not believe things that are accurate. But I just do believe things that appear to be accurate. It's
I agree, but I feel the same way about like morality. Like if someone came to me with like a compelling argument, I don't think there is a compelling argument, or rather, I don't think that a compelling argument for valuing human suffering would ever work on me or like the vast majority of people. Like it's just so hard coded into us, like even potentially biologically. politically, let alone socially, that it feels like it'd be pretty impossible to get past that. So I 100% agree. Like, ultimately, this is like a fruitless point. Like, you're never actually going to encounter someone that's like, well, we ought not believe things that are accurate. But like, I do still think there's like a parallel there in the sense of like, we are the entire system lies on foundations that are just sort of arbitrary.
Yeah, so when I was saying that I halfway believe it, like the thing that you just said is the half that I do believe. But then the other half where I think they are different is that epistemic norms, I think, can have external validation and moral norms, as far as I can tell, just don't.
Yeah, I think I see what you're saying. I think I would agree in the sense, I wouldn't say necessarily external validation, because I can't even like conceptualize what an external validation would look like. We're talking about external to like our system of logic and understanding. But I do agree. There's more like there's a more rigorous internal system of like verifying things as opposed to morality.
Right.
I think we're describing the same thing. We're just using different words. When you say externally validating, I would still consider that internal to like the shared system. But like, we still are agreeing that is distinct from morality in the sense that like, you can then test whether or not your predictive system is correct. You can't test whether or not your moral system is correct, because the correctness of a moral system in and of itself isn't a given.
Yeah. I mean, I think there are some tests you can do on a moral system. Like, you can test whether it's internally consistent. You can you can test whether or not it is able to successfully answer some particular question for you and even produce any kind of recommendation at all. But if your moral system were just foundationally wrong, I don't know how you would ever test that. But I think with epistemic norms, I think you can test that, because if your epistemic system were just, if you you
can test its prediction. You can test its predictive power in a way that you can't test the actual like correctness of a moral system. The only thing that I'm sort of trying to get across, and I think we actually agree, is just that you can't test the sort of fundamental correctness of the epistemic system in the first place, like whether or not we ought believe things that are true, I guess.
Sure. So I agree, but I think that what that is a normative question applied to the epistemic system.
Yeah, I think I agree.
Yeah. But if I just like don't believe that normative statements exist or apply or whatever, I'm not saying I do believe this, but so somebody who just disregards all normative statements could nevertheless have epistemic like predictive and descriptive models, and then you go to that person and you go, but ought we believe things that are accurate? And they just go like, I don't care, I don't have any answer to this question, but I'm still here successfully describing what I observe. So like, what are you gonna do about it?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, all right, that's all I got.
And if that's true, well, you might have to fight that inclination, but the thought is like, look, if you already got these, then there's no reason to fight it. You've already let the normativity into the gate or something, so some metaphor, so just let them in too. That's the best I got on the fly.
Hi, my name's Justin.
Justin.
What I was thinking about was your principle applies to things that clouds say exist, and then like it goes on to say that you or someone you trust, but different cultures believe in different things.
Yeah.
So if you have like a very religious culture, they would believe in a God.
Yeah.
God would have probably possess the objective morality.
Yeah. Or he would like write it down and give it to you or something like that. Yeah.
But then like in a non-religious culture, that God may not exist, so then you don't have that being to give you the objective morality.
Yeah.
The principle doesn't always apply to everyone, because not everybody believes in the same thing, or don't believe that the same thing exists.
Yeah, good. One way to put it, maybe this is too brief of a summary of your point, is there is just, and this is true, you're just right, there's massive disagreement, right? Globally speaking. Well, or it seems like there's massive disagreement. You might think, on closer inspection, it might be that, like, there's like marginal disagreement, but like, there's more agreement than there is disagreement. But let's just assume that there is massive disagreement. I'm not so sure that shows that there's no one true objective fact of the matter, right? I mean, like, there's massive disagreement about a lot of stuff. And
Oh, can we
So
pause
what's something that, I mean,
Okay, so yes, the mere fact that there exists massive disagreement, I will agree that does not show that there necessarily is a right or wrong answer to a question, but I think it's a different thing to say there's a disagreement about which we could go find the answer and test whether somebody's right or wrong, and a moral disagreement. I'm not particularly so sure that there is such a way to test it.
Yeah, I agree.
flat Earth is the example that it sticks in my mind because it's stuck there already. So there's some significant disagreement about that. But like, we don't then think like, look, they've got their Earth shape, and we've got our Earth shape, and theirs apply to them, and ours apply to us. No, they're just wrong, those flat Earthers. And we disagree, and they're wrong. So like, if we disagree about moral facts, like maybe we're just right, or maybe we're wrong and somebody else is right. But like, here's the thought: the mere fact of disagreement. I mean, maybe if you build it up a little bit more, it might suggest that there's no objective fact behind there, making one group right and one group wrong, or one person right and one person wrong. But the mere fact of disagreement doesn't seem to show that there's no objective fact of the matter. Yeah.
So I see how the principle is used to understand descriptive things you can quickly tell and you understand whatever.
Yeah.
But how can you use it to explain actual morality, the difference between right and wrong? Like, how do we use this principle, or how
Good.
use this principle of figuring out whether or not Beyonce is right or wrong?
Yeah, good. Good. So okay. So we have technical terms for the distinction that you're making. So the technical name is the difference between a consideration of ethics and meta-ethics. You don't have to remember that because there's no quiz, because this isn't part of a class or anything. Right, so like an ethical question, a straightforward ethical question is like, what should Beyonce do? Right? This won't get us an answer to a question like that. Because this is about a sort of like bigger, broader question, not actually a more important question, right? But a bigger, broader question about, are there even moral facts at all, right? So like the whole talk actually has been about this broader, we'd say meta-ethical issue about whether moral or ethical facts, I've just switched to ethical from moral. I use them synonymously. Some people distinguish them, sorry. It's been about this bigger, broader issue of like, whether there's any morality at all. But then you're right. It doesn't give us any answers to the question of, well, what are the moral truths? What are they specifically? I want a list. I want to know what they are. For that, you need, so we have Philosophy 119. That's Introduction to Ethics. That'll deal with first order ethical questions. 121, that's Contemporary Moral Problems. That'll deal with first order ethical questions. There's a class in meta-ethics. There are all sorts of other, how many are there? Hundreds of philosophers who focus on those issues? Thousands? Yeah, of course there's thousands. Sorry. Michael. Oh, I already got Michael. Michael already said something. Stop. Pause, Michael. Was there anyone else who had their hand raised? I know that you did, but now you're not raising it again, which is perfectly fine. Unless it's in this. Okay. Heather had something.
I wanted to note that it says not just listen to somebody who you trust, but they experience.
Oh, yeah. Well, good. So good. Right. So we shouldn't, I hope that I've phrased it right. You should only believe in the existence of descriptive things that you or someone trustworthy experiences.
Right. So some of those stuff that we disagree about is stuff that we depend on our religious authorities for, but they didn't actually
experience,
see, hear, smell, touch.
Yeah, that's right. Right. So you have some trustworthy folks, right? Like your aunt or someone, right? And I'm just going to grant that your aunt is trustworthy, right? But that doesn't mean you believe everything your aunt says. You should only believe that things that your aunt says about things that your aunt experienced, right? You shouldn't believe everything that your aunt says.
She can experience
and then, of
moral
course, if your aunt says that she experienced some things that plausibly she didn't experience, and there's other reasons to think she's not trustworthy, then you shouldn't even believe her about things she claims to have experienced. But yes, it's only things that they have experienced that these trustworthy people should be believed about.
Do the trustworthy people have to still be alive?
I don't see why. No.
They don't have to be.
No, they don't have to be alive.
They could be like
They could be like
described in the Bible or something.
Yeah, I mean anyone. Yeah.
People who like talk to God.
You might think, well, yeah, good. It could be people. It could be people. Good.
Got to see.
They were there.
God came down in a cloud in front of Mount Sinai.
Right. Yeah, good.
Yeah.
I mean, there's
the original tribe people.
Right. Well, and then there's other prophets who got to see things or got to smell or hear things. Yeah. Right. They got to experience things like that. I should have added. I think I forgot to add this. When you add this last clause at the end, that you can believe in things that must exist in order to explain what you or others experience. Like that clause will almost certainly get you Pluto and electrons, but it will maybe also get you God. Like there are arguments for the existence of God. You'll have to take philosophy of religion for these, right? There are arguments for the existence of God that go by way of, look, here's some stuff that you've experienced. The only way to explain this stuff, or the best way, is by believing that some God exists. Okay, anyway, but that's not directly in response to Gary's point. The point is just... Well, anyway, okay, that's true. Well, so then I need to say nothing.
Heather also mentioned the example of numbers earlier on.
Oh, yeah, what about numbers?
Yeah, well, will that fall under the second must exist to explain? It might.
It controversially, that's right.
To explain
this will get you...
Of like three things, you need the number three.
You need three to exist.
Yeah,
Yes. Although, and maybe I shouldn't say controversial things, but like I kind of don't think the number three does exist. Anyway, don't tell the dean. Yeah.
So, what about the cases of things that like someone else experiences but we can't prove that they experienced it? So, does proof have anything to do with that as well, or?
Yeah. Good. Yeah. Good. Yeah. Good. So, I think we're going to have to modify the principle in some way, or we're going to have to build it all into trustworthy, or something like that. It's definitely going to be the case that people do have experiences that are illusory, right? Hallucination is a real phenomenon, right? It's a real scientifically legitimate phenomenon. And what you don't want is for your empirical principle like this to tell you to believe in the reality of things that just anyone, including yourself, has experiences of, or as if of those things. Yeah, I don't have an on-the-fly way of modifying it, but it'll have to be modified. Michael, I like retracted calling on you before, so now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Things have added up, and now I'm just trying to figure out which were the 7 points that we're doing. So, okay. So the first one, you're defining morality, objective morality, saying that it's something that applies to everyone.
Yes.
Everywhere is right or wrong. It applies to everyone.
I mean something like facts about which actions are right and wrong. We can say for everyone, everywhere, regardless of what anyone thinks. How about that?
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Second thing.
Yeah.
Going back to Hume's example, right? Word.
Yeah.
Right. Even with the open Hume's example still holds is that you can't pinpoint what the vice is. Like there's no physical thing to say like, yes, right behind the liver, that is where the wrong is.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. That's he's definitely right about that part.
Yeah, so and then if you can't in the objective sort of tangible sense, you can't find the wrong, then I think maybe Hume's example holds. Wait.
Yeah, well, so there's multiple steps, right? So I ran through Hume's argument kind of quick, but there's different steps in the argument, and you can think that some steps work and other steps don't, or some claims, some premises in the argument work and some premises don't, right? So one claim that he's making is you don't have any experience of viciousness or vice. That is, you don't have any experience of wrongness. That's one claim. And then there's the additional claim, sort of like, therefore, well, then there's a principle like this, right? And then you put the fact that you don't experience the vice together with a principle like this, that'll be another premise in the argument, And maybe there's some more in there, right? And then you're going to get a conclusion something like, therefore you shouldn't believe in the reality of objective moral facts. That is, a fact about what's really right and wrong, in this case, in the object, in the act, other than just in your mind. And so the thought is, he can be right that you don't experience the vice, but then he can be wrong about this. In my line, the line that I'm pushing is that this principle doesn't apply to cases like that, cases of normative objects, like moral objects. Yeah.
It does make another point that what you feel is right wrong here is just an emotion,
Yeah.
emotional reaction
Yeah.
to an event or phenomenon.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that would be, in my opinion, the harder crux of this argument to disprove. Because as you point out, various cultures have different reactions to various phenomena. So
Yes.
that's what I think is the more convincing argument, that there is not an objective moral, because it's just merely an emotional reaction.
Well, I'm not sure. Just like, if you take it just like that, we don't yet have an argument against objective moral facts. We have a statement that there aren't any. Like a very kind of attractive statement that there aren't any, right? But nonetheless, it's just a statement. It's not an argument yet, right? If we just say, look, all the cultures in the world, and indeed all the people, if you get detailed enough, disagree about which actions are right and which actions are wrong. And then what else do you say? Then you add something like, and there's no objective moral facts about, there's no objective facts about what's right and wrong. Well, if you just take that statement as just a statement, then it's just a statement of that I think is incorrect, but I haven't really argued against. You could change that "and" there to something like a "therefore," and then you've got the beginnings of a loose structure of an argument. It's like, there is all this disagreement, therefore there are no objective moral facts, right? And then it's closer to the argument that we were talking about before. But maybe I've missed something. Adam seems like he's gonna.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know if you have missed something. Well, perhaps you've missed this.
Yeah.
So if I'm not mistaken, the big problem with trying to apply this principle to like all kinds of statements and laws is that it's self-defeating insofar as it appears to be an epistemic norm.
Yeah.
I wonder if making a distinction between, say, like hypothetical and categorical imperatives in a way that could have us kind of reconceive some of these things that we're thinking of as normative laws as perhaps descriptive laws might save the principle and, sorry Ryan, in the process maybe lose the defense of moral laws. So for example, if like for prudential laws, it's something like, if you want to make lots of money, bail on your group members and do a solo career. And that's the sort of thing that like seems like it could be descriptive. It's just describing the means to an end.
Good.
And we could do a similar sort of a thing with epistemic norms by saying,
if you want to believe the truth,
you don't want your beliefs to be contradicted by future experience, or if you want to believe true things,
you want to or something like that.
You want to think of it,
right?
Then these can be reworked as descriptive claims in a way that it seems like the moral laws maybe won't.
Yeah, good. Well, let's try it. The way you said it was something like, I mean, I want to object to the first way you do it, with hypotheticalizing it, right? So if you go, if you want, right, dollars, right, then release solo album, right? Something like that, but it only applies in a limited domain. Beyonce from 1995 to 1998, that was her window, something like that. When was Destiny's Child a thing? 90 to 96, I think? I Googled it earlier. Yeah, okay. So anyway, I mean, this, it is now hypothetical, right? It's got this structure where it's like about like it's got an antecedent with a desire in it, what you want. But then I think it's still normative. Like really, this is just elliptical for then you ought to, right? So it's still a claim about what ought to be the case. It's just it only ought to be the case if something happens, if you want this, right? So it won't work like this.
I could represent what seems like the same sort of content by just saying, drop the ought.
Yeah, good.
And just say, releasing a solo album will get you money.
Yeah, good. Yeah. Releasing. Now we've gotten rid of the ought. I was going to do this, but then you... No. It happens at the same pace or whatever. Releasing solo album will cause money. Right? Like now it's just a causal claim.
It's not action.
Right. So now it doesn't tell you what to do. It just tells you what will happen or whatever. And I mean, yeah, maybe that's all there is. Right. You might have thought it just works so good with evil things. Pick your favorite terrible, truly evil thing, right?
Buying Hogwarts
So
Legacy.
what? That it will result in something.
True.
We want to know whether it should be done or not. And presumably you think it shouldn't. That's the important or interesting thing, not what follows from what, causally. Yeah.
This might be like a very elementary question. Regarding what Dean was saying, if you look onto any active device and you look onto the other thing, fire is reflecting itself.
Yeah.
Is it possible that he's mistaken in saying that what we might call a negative emotion elicited from seeing a murder is actually just a reinforcement of that spice?
Good. Good. So this is a way of pressing against the other premise in the argument, right? So like in responding to Michael's question, I roughly, without even writing it down, sketched out the steps in a Humean argument. It's you don't experience the evilness. You shouldn't believe in things that you don't experience, something like this, right? Therefore, you shouldn't believe in evilness, right? That's how the argument goes. And so the thought was, the original, there was a problem with this, but the thought is, it might be wrong. You might be wrong that you don't, he might also be wrong, he might be doubly wrong, that you don't also experience evilness. Maybe when you have that, that's just what an experience of evilness feels like. Just like you didn't know, maybe you didn't know that you had experienced, I don't know, what's like a platypus? You think you've never seen a platypus? But actually, there was a platypus at that thing that you were at, and you smelled it, and you're like, what's this smell? I don't know. Turns out you had experienced a platypus olfactorily, right? You just didn't know what platypi smelled like, right? And the thought is maybe Hume's wrong about his other claim. Maybe vice is something you experience, and Hume just doesn't know what it feels like. That feeling of disapprobation, maybe that's just what evilness feels like when you experience it. Yeah, maybe Hume's wrong. Yeah, double wrong. Derek, and then... oh, yeah, you had... Yeah, go ahead.
Hopefully I'm getting this across in the correct way. So what happens if you find out that there is a descriptive morality that you can extrapolate to the normative realm, if that makes sense?
I'm not sure. So the way I'm using the word morality, it just is a normative thing. So I'm wondering what the descriptive morality is.
So the way that I see it is morality could be biological. And in that sense, it would be descriptive, and something like that could be extrapolated to norms.
Good. Okay. So Hume, I think, agrees that that moral sentiments are a biological thing, right? So the thought is something like, it's an evolutionary thing, you might think. The species evolved. This is controversial, I guess. I don't know enough about evolutionary biology to know, but maybe it's true that our species evolved certain moral sentiments, certain moral feelings, because it advantaged us in some way. And so there's totally a biological explanation, an evolutionary explanation for why we have these feelings. The trick is to go from these feelings to the existence of universal moral laws or universal moral facts that are just out there saying which actions are truly right and truly wrong, regardless of what anyone thinks about it. Maybe the route to go is that's what moral reality feels like, is it feels like that. So that, I think your best bet at making that jump from descriptive facts about how people feel morally to normative facts, objective normative moral facts, is by route of, one good bet is by route of, that's just what normative morality feels like.
I think he's got that backwards. I think if normative morality is real, then it's a thing that could be described.
Yeah, I agree.
That there's morality and biology because, as you said, we have social figures developed certain ways of removing people that would cause other people's groups up in cases.
Yep. We condemn people that behave in certain ways, and if we hadn't started condemning people that behaved in certain ways, indeed, some of us did back in the day, those groups didn't make it evolutionarily. And so we resulted from the ones that censured and condemned certain forms of behavior, and we made it, and that's why we all have, I mean, you might think that that's why, something like that, this is really very speculative, but something like that might be the reason why there isn't, widespread disagreement. Like, there's some disagreement, but you might think there's actually a lot of agreement, and the reason there's a lot of agreement is because of these evolutionary forces. But like, always keep in mind the difference between our moral sentiments, our moral feelings, what we feel is right and wrong, and the moral truth, if there is one. Yeah, and then I'll get Ryan. Yeah, you. Sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm still having a whole how can we know if there is no good morality? I know you said I believe in the epistemic laws and consciously accept epistemic laws. Yeah. So why would it be absurd to accept the existence of moral laws?
Yeah, that's all I said. That's all I said, and then I stopped.
That doesn't. I don't know. It's not following from.
Well, it doesn't. Good. The reason it's not following you is that it doesn't follow. It doesn't. So all I was doing when I said, look, we already believe in epistemic normativity, so like, there's nothing spooky or weird about moral normativity. That's not a decisive argument for the existence of moral reality. It's just like eliminating what I take to be one of the barriers. Indeed, it's like kind of the same barrier that this argument put up in the first place. So if you're disappointed because I haven't given like a full-blown direct argument for the existence of objective morality, then you may remain disappointed because I don't have one.
I am disappointed.
That I'm prepared to give right now. Ryan.
Maybe some other time.
I just want to make a quick comment on what you guys mentioned about biology being grounded. The difficulty with that, with trying to make that move from descriptive, like this is the behavior of this or that species, this is what perpetuated our species, is at best you can say doing something we consider immoral is socially deviant. So you still have no prescriptive factor there. If someone wants to rape or kill someone, it's really socially deviant from herd mentality, but there still lacks that prescriptive part. What I really want to get at was that every statement here someone has made to either try to reduce it to a descriptive plane or just flat out reject that we have these normative claims is sort of implicitly, it's a normative behavior, because what you're saying each time is you're saying, no, that's not true. You ought to believe this, which is what's true. And you can say that's wrong, just say, no, Ryan, you have that wrong. It's like, well, are you not now also trying to push me towards truth?
Yeah, good.
You're gonna get
well,
a circularity there that means you're always appealing to a normative claim.
Well, yes and no. I mean,
can't be both.
Well, yeah. Well, I'll tell you how yes and no. Yes, in the sense that often implicit in a discourse are certain epistemic or discursive norms, right? But it doesn't directly follow. Like it's not entailed by the fact that there's some evolutionary fact and that someone uttered that fact. It doesn't follow directly from that everyone else ought to now believe it. You need to add this normative premise, and although that epistemic normative premise is plausible, well, it's an extra step or whatever. That's just one little point I wanted to add. Michael.
Okay.
Well, let's respond to it. First, I think for biology, where you're going, because objective morality, so that we evolve to have sort of moral sense. And the thing I would think of is an objective morality would apply, an objective, and if we were objective, wouldn't it apply to people who are not human as well? Like if there was a conscious Martian race, right? Would their objective morality would apply to them?
Yeah, good.
But they would have a completely separate evolutionary track.
Oh. This point about evolutionary, I didn't see it till the end. Good. Okay. This point about disagreement, and there's maybe not so much disagreement, and there's maybe this biological or evolutionary thread behind our moral opinions or moral sentiments or whatever.
Throbocentric.
The default view, you might think in morality, is that if there's an objective moral truth, it applies equally well to androids and aliens, if there are such things, or if there were such things, right? Like if you have an alien, if an alien shows up, and then an alien's like, hi, I'm conscious, I have rational thoughts, I can get a B+ in a logic class, I've got like a hyperspace drive, and I can communicate with you, and I'm just as good at humans at this whole chit-chat game, but like I'm all tentacles or whatever, right? If the alien shows up like that, the default view you might think is like, look, they're bound by the moral laws that we're bound by. But the thought is they don't have that evolutionary history or whatever. Yeah, I take it that the main upshot or one upshot of that is just that makes the story that you have to tell going from evolutionary facts to real objective moral facts, it makes it even more complicated or whatever. But you might have already thought that story was very hard to tell in the first place.
Also,
Yeah.
I'm not entirely convinced by the whole, so that there's prudential, moral,
epistemic, norms, yeah.
I'm not entirely convinced by okay, well, we have epistemic laws that implicitly must believe it.
Yeah.
But then how are you making that jump? Say,
good.
Prudential, moral laws. I mean, that's a massive jump.
It's a jump, man. I just jumped. I didn't even put down the floor or whatever or the bridge. No, that's right. Look, there are arguments to be made, and there are reasons to think that one variety of normativity is real and another variety is not. The thought though was just like these are all broadly of a type, and once you let one in, all of the arguments against the other one, all of the arguments against moral facts, moral laws, moral reality that hinged on their mere normativity must have failed because there really is some other type of normativity. So that move was still a kind of merely a defense of moral reality against a certain specific kind of attack. It wasn't really an argument for its reality. And there's a jump there, and I just sort of made it, but now I admitted it, so that makes it better maybe.
Yes, sir. I was just wondering, when we talk about the biological features and the evolution and all, but don't we also have a defeat for that today? We have sociopaths and people that we consider insane. We have people today that we say they can't already defer from right or wrong.
Yeah.
And you're just saying they didn't evolve enough, even though they're around today.
Good.
Us.
Look, there's a lot of ways in which people diverge from the evolutionary norm. I mean, of course, every mutation, even the ones that lead to adaptations, diverge from the evolutionary norm, right? So, someone is born and they I don't know, they don't have a tail anymore. I know it was slower than that. I guess it got smaller and smaller, but as a dummy example, they diverged from the evolved pattern of the species, and then it turned out it was great, and then they procreated more, and then you speciate. The species splits, right? And then there's the monkeys or the apes, and then us or whatever. So those are the cases where some individual that deviates from the evolutionary norm successfully procreates enough or whatever. But the answer, the only response I have to that is just yes, people do deviate from the evolutionary norm or whatever. But remember, keep in mind, if the question we're interested in is whether there are objective moral truths, objective moral laws facts about which actions are really and truly right and which actions are really and truly wrong that apply to everyone everywhere. If that's what we're interested in, then that's a different thing from whether we evolve to have moral opinions. Though those moral opinions maybe get us an argument for the objective moral facts or maybe don't. Heather.
I think, for me, one of the problems about asking the question about whether or not there's objective morality is one of the big differences between unicorns and objective morality is I have a pretty good idea what it is there isn't. When there isn't a unicorn, there's a thing.
Yeah.
Think of that.
Yeah.
And have a
Yeah, good.
pretty horses and things.
Right. Right.
But when we say, well, is there objective morality? I'm not quite sure what that is that I'm trying to prove.
Yeah, good.
Exists or not exists.
Good.
So we sort of jump, from my perspective,
Yeah.
in kind of, we jump too far.
Yeah.
Try to answer this question without, okay, well, what would it be?
What would we even? Yeah.
Be?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you only have I had like 40 minutes.
No, I know.
But, okay. But like, here's a go. Let me try.
Yeah.
Well, let me just try, and now in 1 minute, to specify, to give you a unicorn story about, objective moral facts, right? That is, a unicorn story is just like I tell you, it's like, it looks like a horse, it has a horn on the middle, and the top of its head, it farts rainbows. If you drink its blood, you become immortal. Whatever the facts about unicorns are, right? And then you're like, okay, now I know what it would be for there to be such a thing. Thank you. Now I know what it would be for there to be such a thing, and then we can go looking and see if we find one, right? And so let's spend a little bit more time saying this isn't going to be that satisfying, I don't know, but here we go anyway. The objective moral entities or whatever, it seems like we can call them entities if we want to talk about it in terms of laws. They could be entities. Laws are entities. They're things, right? Or we can talk about facts. Either one will do. I can run it either way, right? If we're happy with certain facts or patterns, right? There's a fact that people attend, movies. That's a fact, right? And you believe that fact is true. It's a true fact. Fine. If we're doing it in terms of facts, then I'm just going to write a moral fact underneath it. Now it's going to have a moral vocabulary. It's going to have some moral terms, and this is going to have some cinematic terms, right? But the thought is you understand what these terms mean. What's people ought not murder, right? And what is the ought? Well, maybe it is a little more mysterious than cinematic stuff, but look, I just always lean back on that epistemic stuff because people ought believe whatever they ought to believe, that the earth is round or whatever. It just seems like we know if we're comfy with that being true, whatever that is, then this is just going to be slightly different from that. I mean, so here's my unicorn story that I've given very poorly and quickly. It's something like, what kind of a thing is it? It's like a horse, right? Except for it's a little different than a horse. It's got one of these on the middle of its head, and and whatever. Okay, so and then you're okay, I'm looking for something that looks like a horse, but it's got one of these on its head. I get it. Okay, I'll see if I find that. It's the best I got.
The issue that I'm having that I'm seeing with the principle is if you completely trust someone that you enter your mother, your mother kind of knowledge from your world.
Yeah. Well, she tells you that she experienced a unicorn, right? So she doesn't just tell you there is a unicorn. She tells you, I saw a unicorn and I wrote it, or whatever. Yeah, good. Yeah, good.
If someone was to say, I
Yeah.
have experienced God,
Yep.
I have experienced God,
Right.
then there goes into, do I trust this person?
Good.
And if you come from a background where you wasn't grown up in a religious setting,
Yep.
you may not trust them even though what they say is true, or
Right.
you may trust them and they may just be on drugs.
So here's the thing. I don't think the principle gets the result, nor do I think it should get the result, that under no circumstances should you believe in the existence of God. Or indeed, it shouldn't even get the result that under no circumstances should you believe in the existence of unicorns. Right? listen, someone tells you that they met a unicorn or God, right? Otherwise, you think they're a very trustworthy person. Maybe you think that this is a rather exotic claim, so you look into their trustworthiness in greater detail. You subject them to a brain scan, if you like. You do a background check. You call up all their neighbors, and you ask about their recent behavior. If you conclude that this person, oh, and then there's more people too, right? And they saw the thing as well. They saw the unicorn also. They heard the word of God, right? You do brain scans on all of them. You call all of their references. You really have excellent evidence that they're trustworthy. Then this principle, it seems to me, you do enough of that, you do enough checking as to their trustworthiness, then this principle gets the result that you ought to believe in unicorns. But that's the right result.
But it doesn't guarantee there are.
It doesn't guarantee that there are. That's right. Oh, good. Good distinction. So, like, just because you follow this principle, it doesn't mean you'll be infallible. Yeah, good. Right. 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 Yeah, it's harder. Harder to fact check them. Yeah, but you call their living references, and so, or their, yeah, it's harder to fact check. But the point is just the point. And let me just repeat this, and then I'll get Gary. The point is just one. This principle only says what you should believe. It doesn't say what's going to turn out to be true.
Oh, can we pause
now, if
here?
you follow this principle,
Okay, so he's saying that principle says what you should believe, and I know it's phrased that what you should believe, but I think the implication is that it's actually telling you what not to believe. I don't think it's actually telling you what to believe. Because when it says you should only believe things that are in this category, I don't think he's actually saying that you should believe everything that's in that category. I think he's saying there are things in this category that you should or that you should not believe, but things outside of this category should not be believed.
I'm not sure I'm following. Can you say that one more time?
Yeah. So he's saying you should only believe things that are in this category that he's defined in this statement, right? Does that make sense so far?
Yeah.
Yeah, so when I say you should only believe things that are in that category, I'm like implicitly saying that you should not believe things that are not in that category, right?
Ooh, maybe. I don't know. I think there's a distinction. There is a distinction, although it's very hard to navigate because, like, our human, we're not robots. But I think there is a distinction between not believing something and being agnostic as to the thing.
Yeah. I agree that there is. So.
I guess you could just say you should believe that you ought to be agnostic. You should believe in agnosticism in regards to this subject that you're not sure one way or the other.
Yeah. So things that are outside of this category, you should either disbelieve or be agnostic about, right? Are we okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that's really all this statement is saying, is that things that are outside of this category, you should disbelieve or be agnostic about. But things that are within the category, there are some that you should believe, there are some that you should disbelieve, and there are some that you should be agnostic about, right?
Yeah.
Right. So really, this statement isn't really ever telling you to believe anything. It's only telling you to disbelieve certain things. Or be agnostic about them.
I guess that's an interesting way of formulating it. I don't know I don't know if you believe that X is a given value. Do you truly believe that it is that value, or do you just not believe that it's any other values? I feel like that's a difficult thing to sort out, like, logically.
Maybe it would help to go through an example or something, right? So like, I maybe a couple different examples. We could go an example of something in this category and an example of something not in this category, right? So an example of something that's in this category might be like, remember a couple of weeks ago when we were going over some optical illusions?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that would be something that you experience directly, but you still shouldn't believe it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that if you follow this epistemic norm that's written on the board here, that this epistemic norm doesn't actually contradict that, right? It says you should only believe things that are, that you experience yourself, that someone trustworthy experienced, or that are necessary to explain the things that we experience. And I think that allows for us to sometimes be wrong about things that we experience, right?
Okay, yeah, I understand. Yeah, I agree with that.
Right. So this statement is not actually mandating that we must believe everything that we experience, or that someone trustworthy experience, or that is necessary to explain what we experience. It's just saying that those are the things that we're allowed to believe, right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's an interesting way of formulating it, but I think I actually like that in a way of like, instead of getting instead of approaching it from the framework of like what ought you believe, but viewing it almost more from like a permissions perspective of saying like you definitely can't believe this, right? And almost like narrowing down the options.
Yeah. That's exactly how I'm thinking of it, right? But the reason I'm inferring,
and that actually makes a lot of sense. Sorry, just to add on before we move off of that point, because that's oftentimes how you'll deal with like problem solving. Like if you're given, if there's like 5 options, one of the easiest ones would be like, okay, we definitely can't do this one, and we almost probably can't do this other one. So that leaves 3. I mean, you do this all the time with actual problem solving, so it actually makes a lot of sense to apply it to this as well.
yeah, and this is like kind of a problem-solving exercise. So anyway, like the reason I'm interpreting it that way is when it says you should only believe these things, I think that's what the word "only" is doing. It's excluding things that are outside of this category, right? Yeah, so it's saying things that are outside of this category ought not be believed. You can be agnostic about them, or you can disbelieve them, but you ought not believe them. If you accept this norm, which there's debate about whether to do that, but so anyway, like the reason I was taking issue with what this lecturer was just saying, Jeffrey Kaplan, I guess is the guy's name, he was saying that this statement is telling you what to believe, but I don't think it is. I think it's only telling you what you're not allowed to believe. I don't think it's mandating that you believe anything. I think it's only disallowing you from believing certain things.
Yeah.
And so then I've got this kind of like conundrum in my head that I don't know how to resolve this, right? Because for every statement that you disbelieve, doesn't that mean you believe the negation of that statement?
Do I have to believe in the negation of the statement?
Yeah, if you're not agnostic about it, like if you just disbelieve it, right? Like if I believe there are no unicorns.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's the negation of the statement that there are unicorns, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in a way, that's almost a statement in and of itself. There are no unicorns.
Right. So now here's a problem with this statement, right? Like because the like if like I haven't experienced a unicorn. I don't think anyone trustworthy that I know has experienced a unicorn, and I don't think unicorns are necessary to explain what I've observed. But so therefore, I like on these grounds, I would reject the statement that unicorns exist. But likewise, I might be compelled to reject the statement that unicorns don't exist, right? Because I haven't experienced firsthand like that unicorns don't exist. I haven't. Nobody I know that's trustworthy has experienced that unicorns don't exist, and I think the non-existence of unicorns is not necessary to explain anything either, right?
Yeah.
So maybe the best I've got off the top of my head about what to do with that is that just anything outside of this category you would just have to be agnostic about. You couldn't really disbelieve it either, because both the statement itself and its negation would have to both fall outside this category, right?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think I agree, but I think that is compatible with the formulation that he's, or I should say formulation, with sort of the statement that he's putting forward. It just matters how you formulate whether or not you would say, I don't believe unicorns aren't real is a statement you would put in there, or if you would put in the statement, I have no reason to believe that unicorns are real. I think I think this is mostly like a quirk of like language, but I guess to be fair, what I was going to say is I think this is mostly a quirk of how we express language, or how we express these logical statements in the form of language. But I guess to be fair, it's kind of hard to disentangle those necessarily. It's not like there's necessarily some pure logic that can exist outside of like language, since language is how we conceptualize these ideas in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, like, maybe it's just a quirk of language, but I kind of don't really look at it that way. I mean, maybe I'm wrong to look at it this way, but I sort of think the language is trying to describe some fact about the universe that we live in, right? And if I say that there are unicorns, or if I say that there are not unicorns, I don't think that that is just a semantic distinction.
How so?
Because if there are unicorns or if there are not unicorns, those two descriptions are going to map onto different states of the universe that we live in, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm understanding our disagreement. I agree that there's a difference between there are unicorns or there aren't unicorns. What
Right.
what I'm wondering is if you had in the circle the statement, if you didn't have in the circle, in World 1, there is no statement about unicorns inside the circle.
Mm-hmm.
And in World 2, there is inside the circle, there is a statement, unicorns aren't real. I think I think like those are the two states that could exist separate from believing unicorns. But I don't think but I do think there is a difference between those in the sense of you can represent agnosticism without the circle, but just not having anything there. But then when it comes to a descriptive fact of or when it comes to a definitive statement, those both do need to be represented inside the circle.
Yeah, so I think that those two statements or those two situations are different with respect to this epistemic norm. Because the circle that just doesn't have any statement about unicorns at all, I think is following this epistemic norm. But the circle that says unicorns do not exist, I think is actually violating this epistemic norm.
Okay.
Because if I believe that unicorns don't exist, but like that belief is not one of the things that he says that I should only believe, right?
Yes. I also want to rewind this and I feel like I'm losing it.
Okay.
In greater detail, you subject them to a brain scan, if you like. You do a background check. You call up all their neighbors and you ask about their recent behavior. If you conclude that this person, and then there's more people too, right? And they saw the thing as well. They saw the unicorn also. They heard the word of God, right? You do brain scans on all of them. You call all of their references. You really have excellent evidence that they're trustworthy. Then this principle, it seems to me, you do enough of that, you do enough checking as to their trustworthiness, then this principle gets the result that you ought to believe in unicorns. But that's the right result.
But it doesn't guarantee there are.
It doesn't guarantee that there are. That's right. Oh, good. Good distinction. So, like, just because you follow this principle, it doesn't mean you'll be infallible.
Okay, because the earlier
Yeah, good.
the person has to be alive still. So that's the thing.
Right.
They're like saying, well,
Right.
knows this experience, God knows this materialism.
Right.
And how could you fact check someone that is dead?
Yeah, it's harder. Harder to fact check them. Yeah, but you call their living references, and so, or their, yeah.
I think what he's describing here is getting to the wrong answer for the right reasons. Sort of like it's sort of like the inverse of like getting to the right answer for the wrong reasons. I think you can have a consistent, because really what he's describing here is the most logical deduction based on the information you have, but acknowledging that information could be limited.
Yeah, I think that's true. I was objecting to something that I think he says maybe like a couple seconds after this, where he says that this norm, this statement is telling you what to believe. But I think he's wrong about that. Because, like, for example, if we try to apply it to unicorns, it seems like he thinks that this statement is telling you not to believe in unicorns. Or rather, to believe that there are no unicorns. But actually, the statement that there are no unicorns violates this epistemic norm.
I'm not sure if I'm understanding what you mean. I think he's saying, when you say that this principle, that he is saying that this principle is what you ought believe, and you're saying that no, you ought not believe that. How do you get to that distinction? Because it seems to me that he is coming to the wrong conclusion, but it is the conclusion you ought come to if you have limited information.
Yeah, but not by way of this principle. I think you ought to believe there are no unicorns, but believing that there are no unicorns violates this principle. I think that's a problem with this principle. And it's also it's either a problem with this principle or a problem with his interpretation of this principle.
Okay, yeah, I think that's where it is, because I think I would actually agree with you, but I'm realizing is that my standard of proof for unicorns, given that we live in a world with like cell phones and stuff like that, would be more than a handful of people.
Yeah, perhaps. But what? Okay, so what's your standard for believing that there are no unicorns?
I think my standard for believing that there are no I think we're going to really need to hammer down what do we mean when we say that there are unicorns, because like a general species of unicorns, we would have run into that, but theoretically if there was one unicorn hiding somewhere in and it's a single immortal being and it like hides in this one area in like the deepest forest in the world and never moves, that could be that is something that I would have to be more agnostic about.
What if it's just like on another planet or something?
Yeah, on another planet, I think that would be fair. That would be one that I have to be agnostic about.
Yeah. So in any case, like, if I were to follow this epistemic norm, I could never I wouldn't believe that there are unicorns until somebody experiences them, or until they become necessary to explain some experience. But likewise, I would never believe that there are no unicorns unless the absence of unicorns somehow becomes necessary to explain my observations.
Yeah, I think it just comes down to what do people say when they mean that that unicorns are real? Because a lot of people are going to say something to the effect of like, this is a creature that exists in the world right now and we've had encounters with, but for some reason there's no evidence now, as opposed to phenomenon that we truly can, because that's something that we ought be able, or not, I shouldn't say ought, that we should be able to verify or that we should be able to verify or disprove. Given the fact that we have all this technology, all these people across the world, yada yada yada. But if they're saying, oh, I believe in unicorns on the other side of the galaxy, well, that is one I would be agnostic to, because we don't have a way to verify or falsify.
Yeah, so that's true, but I think we actually can make probabilistic inferences about things like that, right?
We could, and I guess then it comes down to the question of what probability do you need to incorporate something into, I think it's true. Because you'll never 100% know anything except for, I think, therefore I am.
I don't even think we 100% know that, but like, that's a whole other like tangent. But like, but yeah, I think it's actually very unlikely that there's a planet of unicorns on the other side of the galaxy.
Yeah, it probably actually is pretty unlikely.
Yeah, but by holding this belief, we're violating that epistemic norm, right?
Yeah, I guess the thing that I think the real break we're having with this statement is that you can take this statement and get to radically different conclusions based off of what your standard is. Like, what percentage do you need to get to for any given statement?
Yeah, so this is actually this goes back to one of the things I was first thinking. I didn't speak up about this when he was first writing the statement down, but he said things that must be true in order to explain our observations. I actually think there are lots of things you could believe that it's not that they must be true, but it's just that they appear to be true. They're reasonable inferences from our observations. We have good, strong inductive arguments for them.
Yeah, I think I agree. It's just I think the question is how do I put this? The problem is that when you make an evaluation in your head, okay, there's a 5% chance that this is happening versus a 50% chance, trying to narrow that down to the line where you then choose to incorporate that into your belief system is really difficult, especially because we don't actually work in percentages, we work in feelings, and it's going to vary from one thing to another, right? Like if my friend told me, dude, the other day I went to Subway, it was awesome. That's probably enough evidence for me to now believe it.
Yeah.
But then if someone was like, oh, dude, the other day, I met Tom Cruise and I'm going to be in the next Mission Impossible movie, we're best friends now, I'd be like, okay, I'm going to need a little something more than that.
Yeah. So I mean, really, like this kind of, I think maybe working in percentages instead of feelings should be an epistemic norm, though. Right?
Yeah, I mean, that would be based if we could, but I don't think anyone is up to the task.
No, I kind of agree. Like our brains kind of just don't work that way. Like humans are just kind of apparently bad at statistics, and we can learn to partially overcome that, but we're never going to learn for it to be completely intuitive. Yeah, nevertheless, like I still think I'm dissatisfied with this norm as he's written it, just because it forbids you from rejecting statements that are seemingly false.
Yeah, I agree with this statement. So I want to say no, but if you interpret it in this way, but the reality is I'm doing a lot of work for this statement to reinterpret it in a way that probably is a bit overly charitable to the point of like changing its actual meaning. So I think I actually would have to agree with you there. I think this is like, if you just add a couple more sentences, I think we're golden. But they don't have those sentences.
I actually believe that this kind of stuff is not systematizable. I think it's like you try to add a couple of more sentences, and now you're going to find a couple of more problems, and then you're going to try to add a couple of more sentences, and it's just this endless process. And I don't think there actually is like a logically consistent formulation where you can solve this.
Yeah, it's tough. Thank God we all basically have the same morality.
Yeah, well, I mean, close enough anyway, right?
Yeah, close enough. It could have been a lot worse.
Yeah, for sure. So like, I think this is like what we were saying last week. It's like, I don't think morality actually needs to be objective. It just needs to be common among the participants in the discussion. It get common enough that that we can build on it from there. And for now, that's humans, right? But in the future, who knows? Maybe it's AIs and aliens and evolved lizard people, or what? You know what I mean? Like ghosts, whoever shows up and starts participating in our moral conversations.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think we're on board.
Oh, actually, maybe the unicorns will show up and start participating in our.
Yeah.
That's harder to factor. But the point is just and let me just repeat this, and then I'll get Gary. The point is just, one, this principle only says what you should believe. It doesn't say what's going to turn out to be true. Now, if you follow this principle, the thought is, the empiricist says, you're going to be right more than you're going to be wrong. But look, you follow this principle, and then sometimes it turns out that a whole group of people was hallucinating, trustworthy people. But you were right to believe them because the evidence available to you at the time suggested that they were trustworthy. That's exactly right. You did the right thing. It just, you're not perfect. Yeah, Gary.
I just want to emphasize that there's actually like a principle here, right? So Hume's argument is directly relying on this only if principle. You shouldn't believe it unless there's experiential evidence. And there's a different principle which says you should believe it if. Yeah. That's a harder one to formulate because that involves when you need to bring in defeaters and all kinds of things. Yeah. Don't believe them if they're drunk or they just took mescaline or LSD or whatever. Right. Now you can combine the two, which I think is what you have there. So
I have here. I only have the only.
That would be the if and only if version. Right. It says you should believe it if and only if. Right. Either you experience it or someone you trust. Yeah, good. Or it explains something.
That's right. That's right. I mean, the principle as I've written it here is maybe not all together clear about this issue, but I suppose actually.
But I think Hume only, in his negative argument, only needed the necessary condition principle.
That's right. The only if principle.
The only if part. That you shouldn't believe it unless there's a certain.
That's right. It doesn't. Indeed. One way of following that principle is just to not believe anything.
Yeah. But all these principles have the problem of normativity that you're.
That's right. Frank.
Is it to say that we shouldn't believe things that we don't know exist, like unicorns or morality or virtues or piety?
Yeah, this one I think if you're reading it strictly, where this says only if, you should only believe in these things, the direct implication is like, this just some stuff you should not believe in. Yeah. Right. But it's hard to, it's a vaguely worded.
But neither should you believe in the negation of the statements if we're taking it strictly.
Yeah. We will give people the chance to leave if they want to leave. We'll sort of call things off. But then I and some others maybe will hang out in the room and chat for a little while longer. But before that, so philosophy is a whole thing. It's like a whole discipline. We're a whole department. There's like several of us. There's all sorts of activities that we do. There's something coming up called Public Republic, which is happening on September 27th, and it's all day, and it will be out by the Minerva statue. And that's a reading of the masterpiece of Plato. Maybe you've heard of him. He was a wrestler from quite some time ago, and he's a big deal. And that's a fun activity. And then there's all sorts of classes. And then there's an ethics bowl. That's like a debate-style competition that happens. And there's a philosophy club. And there's all sorts of cool stuff. And thank you very much for coming. And if you brought a chair in, please leave it. Do not remove it. Just leave it where it is.
Okay, well, I did like that better than the other lecture. I'm not satisfied that they covered both sides of the argument adequately, but I think he at least did a serviceable job of covering the anti-objectivist side. I don't know. Do you got anything else you want to add?
Nope.
Okay. Do you want to shout yourself out before we're done?
Yeah, twitch.tv/Flowtrace, twitter.com/Flowtrace, and I will see you guys next. Oh, actually, not next week. I'm not going to be around. I'm going to be in Wisconsin canvassing, so I'm not going to be here Wednesday, but Wednesday after next.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Have a good trip, and thank you for joining us, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Yep. See ya.